My name is Eloan Hart. I was 29 years old when I learned that love can smile across a dinner table, while quietly sliding a trap toward your hand. My boyfriend's father said, "Sign this contract for his student loans, or the wedding's off." I said, "I understand." Then I took the ring back and bought a house instead. 3 months later, the loan collectors were calling him as the responsible borrower. And somehow, according to his family, that was still supposed to be my fault. I was supposed to marry Caleb Mercer, 27. This past June, we had been together 4 years. Engaged for 1. On paper, we looked solid. We had the apartment photos, the holiday cards, the matching mugs, the kind of relationship people described as steady, because they never saw what happened in the quiet spaces. Caleb was warm when he wanted to be. Soft-spoken. Charming. The kind of man who could make apologies sound like poetry without actually changing anything. I loved him. Or at least, I loved the version of him I thought was real. Everything seemed perfect until his father, Gordon Mercer, pulled his power move 3 months before the wedding. It was supposed to be a casual Tuesday dinner at his parents' house. Roast chicken. Too much wine. Diane fussing over the tablecloth. Caleb squeezing my knee under the table whenever Gordon started talking too loudly. Gordon had always given me strange vibes. He was a real estate broker who drove a leased BMW he clearly couldn't afford. He loved saying phrases like generational wealth and family legacy, usually while complaining about interest rates or pretending not to notice overdue notices on the kitchen counter, but Caleb adored him, so I kept my mouth shut. That night, after dinner, Gordon wiped his mouth, pushed back his chair, and reached beside him. He pulled out a manila folder. An actual folder. Thick with typed documents. Clipped together like we were closing a corporate acquisition instead of eating dessert. He slid it across the table toward me. "Before you join this family officially," he said, "we need to discuss Caleb's education investment." I looked at Caleb. He was staring at his plate. Not confused. Not surprised. Yes, still. The education investment was $127. 0 inches. Student loans for Caleb's master's degree in creative writing from a private university. The one Gordon had insisted he attend because, according to him, prestige mattered more than price. "I need you to sign as co-borrower on the refinancing," Gordon said. "Better rates with dual income." I opened the folder. The terms were insane. Variable rate starting at 8.9%. 20-year term. My name would be equally responsible for the balance, not as a spouse helping make payments. Not as someone contributing voluntarily, legally responsible. I looked up slowly. Gordon. This would make me equally responsible for Caleb's debt. For supporting your husband's dreams? He corrected. Caleb flinched at the word husband, but still said nothing. Gordon leaned back with that smug smile I had seen too many times. "Unless you don't believe in his potential?" Diane lowered her eyes. Caleb finally spoke. Barely, above a whisper. "Dad, we talked about this being voluntary." Gordon turned to him sharply. "So, a real woman stands beside her man. She doesn't run when things get serious." There it was. Not a request, a test. I set the papers down carefully. "I need time to review this with a financial advisor." Gordon's face reddened. "Financial advisor, this is about trust. It's also about $127,000. His jaw tightened. "You either commit to this family fully, or..." He let the sentence hang there like a blade. I asked, "Or what? Or maybe, you're not ready for marriage." He said, "Can't have the wedding if you're not committed to the family burden." He paused, then smiled. "I mean, investment." I looked at Caleb again. He was crying silently now. But not from shock. From guilt. That was the moment my stomach went cold. Because he knew, maybe not every number, Maybe not every line in that folder, but he knew enough. I understand, I said. Gordon smiled, like he had won. But Caleb knew me well enough to stop breathing for a second. We drove home in silence. Rain tapped against the windshield. Caleb kept twisting his engagement ring around his finger, over and over, like he was trying to unscrew himself from the moment. When we got inside, he started apologizing before I even took off my coat. I didn't know he would do it like that. Like that, I asked. He swallowed. I knew he wanted to talk about it. But not tonight. Not in that way. I looked at him. He kept talking quickly. I was going to explain. I just didn't want to stress you out before the wedding. That sentence stayed with me. Before the wedding. Not before I signed. Not before I became legally bound. Before the wedding. I couldn't sleep that night. Caleb eventually passed out on the couch, exhausted from crying and apologizing. I sat at the kitchen table, with my laptop open, rereading the numbers Gordon had shoved toward me. Something felt wrong. By morning, I started digging. A mutual friend of ours worked in administration at Caleb's university. I didn't ask her for anything illegal. I just asked whether the number sounded normal for his program. Because Gordon's figure seemed high, she hesitated. Then she said, "Elowen." Caleb graduated with about $63,000 in loans. 63, not 127. The rest, I found out piece by piece. Gordon had taken out parent loans. He had used portions of the money for living expenses. Except those expenses looked a lot like his BMW lease. A vacation to Cabo. And new golf clubs, he bragged about on Facebook. Education, investment. That was what he called it. By evening, I had screenshots, dates, and enough proof to know I wasn't imagining things. When Caleb came home, I was sitting at the table with the folder in front of me. He stopped in the doorway. "You knew," I said. His face changed before he spoke. That was answer enough. Elowen. Caleb. You graduated with $63,000 in loans. Your father is trying to put $127,000 on my back. He started crying immediately. Not angry. Not defensive. Broken. I didn't know how to tell you. But you knew. He said he was helping with living expenses. Caleb whispered. I found out later he was using some of it for himself. He promised he'd pay it back. But then his deals fell through. And Mom didn't know. And everything got complicated. Complicated, I repeated. His voice cracked. I was going to tell you after the wedding. I stared at him. The apartment suddenly felt too small. The framed photos on the wall looked staged. Every promise we had made felt like it had been edited after I signed it. After I was legally tied to you, I said. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I stood up and held out my hand. The ring. He looked at me like I had slapped him. Elowen. Please. The ring. Caleb. He sobbed on the couch for several minutes before slowly pulling it off and placing it in my palm. No dramatic screaming. No thrown glass. No final speech. Just a small circle of metal sitting in my hand. Suddenly lighter than it had ever felt. That night, while Caleb packed a bag, he kept saying, I love you. And maybe some part of him did. But love without honesty is just a beautiful trap. And I was done mistaking a trap for a future. The aftermath hit faster than I expected. Gordon called me 43 times in the first day alone. His voicemails followed the same predictable cycle. Let's discuss this like adults. You've destroyed my son. I'll sue you for emotional damages. My personal favorite came just before midnight. That ring was a promise. You can't just take it back. Actually, I could. The next morning, I spoke with an attorney just to be certain. In my state, an engagement ring was considered a conditional gift. No wedding meant no condition fulfilled. The law was surprisingly straightforward. Even if Gordon wasn't, Caleb moved back into his parents' house. Within days, his social media filled with carefully crafted quotes. Know your worth. The right woman stands beside her man. Some people only love when life is easy. Diane commented beneath every post, with prayer emojis and broken heart symbols. Friends started messaging me. Some asked if I was okay. Others politely wondered whether I'd really abandoned Caleb over money. I didn't argue. People who believed Gordon's version weren't looking for the truth anyway. But Gordon wasn't finished. 5 days after the breakup, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Alowen. Gordon said immediately. Maybe I came on too strong. I smiled to myself. There it was. The negotiation. I'm listening. We compromise. There isn't anything to compromise. You take responsibility for half the loans. Half. We continue with the wedding. He paused dramatically. I'll even reduce our wedding contribution by $5,000. I laughed. Not politely, actually laughed. Gordon. Your contribution was only $9,000. Exactly. Now, it'll be 4. Fair for everyone. There's no wedding. You don't understand what you're throwing away. I understand perfectly. Caleb's devastated. I'm sure he is. His anxiety medication alone. That's no longer my responsibility. He inhaled sharply. What about all the deposits? The venue, catering, photographer, flowers. You're walking away from thousands. I'm handling it. He sounded almost excited. So you're finally realizing what this will cost you. I leaned back in my chair. Actually, no. Silence. Then I explained something Gordon clearly hadn't expected. Every wedding contract was in my name. Every single one. Caleb had insisted months earlier. Planning overwhelmed him. He'd said, "You organize things so much better than I do." At the time, I thought it was trust. Now I realized it was convenience. The venue manager answered on the second ring. Another couple had been waiting months for our date. Instead of losing almost $8,000, I agreed to transfer the reservation for a small administrative fee. I lost less than $800. The caterer was an old college friend who had just opened his restaurant. When I called to cancel, he actually sounded relieved. I'm not supposed to say this, he admitted, laughing awkwardly. But Caleb kept adding impossible dietary requests every week. Gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, keto, shellfish-free, and somehow, still steak. We both laughed. For the first time in days, it felt genuine. My cousin was the photographer. She simply moved another wedding into our spot. The florist was a longtime family friend. She refunded nearly everything after selling the flowers to another event. When all the numbers settled, I'd lost around $2,000. Not 20. Not 35. Tfo. That meant nearly $24,000 remained untouched in my savings account. For 2 days I stared at that number. Originally, it represented centerpieces, table linens, chair covers, custom invitations. A reception I'd probably forget after a year. Then a real estate listing appeared online. Small, 2 bedrooms, old hardwood, hidden beneath ugly carpet, outdated kitchen, peeling paint, good neighborhood. I toured it the next afternoon. The realtor apologized repeatedly. It needs work. I know. The previous owner smoked inside for years. I can repaint. The bathroom hasn't been updated since the 90s. I've seen worse. The moment I walked into the backyard, something settled inside me. No one could threaten to cancel this. No father could hold it hostage. No boyfriend could use it as leverage. It would belong to me. 30 days later, I closed on the house. Signing those papers felt completely different from the ones Gordon had pushed across the dinner table. These signatures bought freedom, not debt. While I spent weekends pulling out stained carpet and repainting bedrooms, Gordon launched his own campaign. Through mutual friends, I learned he'd been telling everyone I had financially abused Caleb. Apparently, I'd stolen the wedding money. He even called my parents. I found out because my mother phoned me afterward, laughing. You'll never guess what Gordon just accused you of. What did you say? I asked whether using student loan money for BMW payments counted as responsible parenting. I nearly dropped my paint roller. How did you know about that? You emailed me the screenshots. Right. I'd forgotten. The receipts were impossible to ignore. Gordon's public Facebook profile was practically evidence. Vacation photos from Cabo. Luxury restaurants. Golf outings. Each timestamp lined up perfectly with loan disbursement dates. He'd even tagged the resort. If arrogance had fingerprints, they would have looked exactly like Gordon's social media. Then another unexpected update reached me. Caleb had started dating again. Barely 2 weeks after we ended things. Apparently he joined several dating apps. One profile described him as looking for a mature woman who understands financial partnership. Mutual friends couldn't stop talking about it. Eventually, he matched with a woman named Olivia. Investment banker. Trove a Tesla. Successful. Confident. Exactly the kind of person Gordon would have approved of. They dated for 3 weeks. Then Olivia searched Caleb's name online. Unfortunately for him, Gordon had been posting long public rants about me, refusing to support the family. On their 4th date, she asked him about it. A friend happened to be eating at the same restaurant. The story reached me almost word for word. So? Olivia asked calmly. Your father wanted your ex to co-sign your student loans. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. It's more complicated than that. How much were the loans? I'd rather not. How much? He looked down. 127,000. Olivia blinked. Your father expected another person to become legally responsible for that. Well. She waited. So yes. He nodded weakly. She excused herself to use the restroom. She never returned. Instead, she paid for her coffee at the front counter and left Caleb sitting there with a dinner bill approaching $200. The next afternoon, Gordon called me. He wasn't trying to negotiate anymore. He was screaming. You ruined Caleb's reputation. I calmly stirred my coffee. How? By making us look like gold diggers? If the shoe fits. He exploded into another rant. I ended the call. Life, meanwhile, became wonderfully ordinary. Saturday mornings meant hardware stores. Sunday afternoons meant sanding cabinets. After work, I watched online tutorials about plumbing repairs and drywall patching. Every improvement reminded me of something important. I was building a future, not financing someone else's past. Occasionally, I posted progress photos online. Nothing dramatic. Fresh paint. New flooring. A rebuilt front porch. Caption after caption. Simply read. Slow progress is still progress. Apparently that was enough. One evening, Caleb sent me a message, nearly 3 pages long. He accused me of rubbing the house in his face. You know, I always wanted a home. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed one sentence. I know. Because I did know, he wanted a house. He just never expected to help pay for one. Remember, those loans Gordon had tried so desperately to make me co-sign. The funny thing about parent loans is that they belong to the parent, not the child, not the future spouse, not whoever happens to fall in love with their son, just the parent. 3 months after our breakup, Gordon finally ran out of places to hide. His original plan had been simple: refinance everything into a private loan using my excellent credit score and steady income. Lower the interest rate. Shift the legal responsibility onto me. Quietly erase years of his reckless spending without anyone asking difficult questions. Without me. That plan collapsed. The loan slipped into default. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was reviewing project schedules at work, my phone buzzed. Gordon. For some reason. I answered. His voice sounded completely different. No arrogance, no lectures, just panic. They're garnishing my wages. I stayed quiet. They can't do this. Who? The loan servicer. They're taking 15% of my commissions. Another pause. This is happening because you refuse to sign. I leaned back in my chair. Gordon. Those are your loans. They were for Caleb. No. I spoke calmly. About $63,000 were for Caleb's education. The rest paid for your BMW lease. Your Cabo vacation. Golf clubs. And everything else you convinced yourself you deserved? Silence. Then, a shaky breath. How do you know all that? It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. What matters is that you tried to trick me into financing your lifestyle. He immediately began threatening lawsuits again. I ended the call before he finished the sentence. A week later, Diane called. She was crying so hard, I almost didn't recognize her voice. They won't let us refinance the house. I didn't answer. They checked Gordon's credit. Another sob. I didn't know. She truly sounded broken. I didn't know how bad everything had become. She begged me to reconsider. Please. You loved Caleb once. I did. And people make mistakes. This wasn't one mistake. It was family. No. I closed my eyes. It was deception. She whispered. He said families share burdens. I answered quietly. Families don't secretly transfer burdens onto someone who never agreed to carry them. She had no response. Then another piece of Gordon's life began falling apart. His broker discovered the wage garnishment. For a real estate agent, financial credibility matters. Clients trust agents with escrow accounts, deposits, and transactions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Someone drowning in undisclosed debt raises uncomfortable questions. He wasn't fired, but he was placed under probation. Another broker had to supervise every transaction. His commission split dropped dramatically. The man who once bragged endlessly about success suddenly had someone checking his paperwork. Irony can be remarkably efficient. About a month later, Caleb contacted me. The message surprised me. Can we meet? No accusation. No guilt. Just those 3 words. Against my better judgment. I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop. For a moment, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His nails were bitten nearly to the skin. He looked exhausted. I'm sorry, he said. Before we even sat down, I waited. I should have told you everything. Yes. I kept thinking Dad would fix it. But he never intended to. Caleb nodded slowly. I know that now. He stared into his untouched coffee. My mom found out he took out a second mortgage, without telling her. I frowned. He forged her signature. That sentence hung between us. She's filing for divorce. There it was. The family Gordon had claimed to protect was collapsing because of the very secrets he demanded everyone else accept. Caleb reached into his backpack. He placed several documents on the table. My mom's lawyer asked if... He couldn't finish. If what? If you'd be willing to write a statement. I looked down. The papers explained everything. Diane wanted evidence showing Gordon's pattern of financial deception and coercion. My experience fit perfectly. I looked back at Caleb. The irony isn't lost on you. Is it? He managed a weak smile. No. You helped hide this. I know. You expected me to marry you before learning the truth. Tears filled his eyes. I loved you. I believed him. In his own damaged way. I believed he had, but love isn't the same as integrity. I still love you. He whispered. I shook my head gently. No. He looked confused. You missed the future you imagined. He lowered his eyes. My dad always told me families work this way. He taught you something else. What? That other people's sacrifices were easier than his own. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I gathered the papers. I'll think about it. When I reached home, I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because life had become unbelievably ironic. The same family that once demanded I carry their debt now wanted my help exposing the man who created it. After 2 days of thinking, I wrote the statement. Not for Caleb. Not even for Diane. I wrote it because truth deserves daylight. I documented everything. The dinner. The contract. The ultimatum. The threats to cancel the wedding. The discovery that education loans had funded vacations and luxury expenses. The pressure to become legally responsible for debt that wasn't mine. Diane's attorney thanked me. Then everything accelerated. The divorce investigation uncovered far more than anyone expected. Hidden credit cards. Loans opened without Diane's knowledge. A vehicle purchased under her name. Money disappearing through accounts she had never seen. The student loans had only been the beginning. Then another agency became interested, the IRS. Apparently using education loan funds for personal expenses creates complications that Gordon had never considered. Tax complications. Penalty complications. Very expensive complications. Late one Tuesday night my phone rang again. 2 a.m. Gordon. Drunk. You destroyed my life. His words slurred together. I quietly walked into my kitchen and started making a sandwich. No. Gordon. You ruined everything. I declined to participate. My son won't even speak to me. I spread mustard across the bread. Can you blame him? He chose you over family. No. He finally chose honesty. He kept shouting about respect, commitment, his generation, loyalty. I finished making my sandwich before he finally stopped talking. You could have had everything. He muttered, a wonderful husband, family connections, real estate opportunities. I smiled to myself. I do have everything. Silence. I have a house that's mine. I took another bite. I have a career I earned. My credit score is excellent. My parents are still happily married. My future belongs to me. What exactly did I lose? He disconnected. The following morning, Caleb sent a message. Dad moved back in with Grandma. I didn't answer. Another arrived. Mom finalized the divorce. Still nothing. Then, another. I got a job at Barnes & Noble. Good for him. Hours later. One final message appeared. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better than what we did to you. That one earned a reply. You're right. I did. Life became peaceful after that. 6 months later, I sold my little fixer-upper. The market had climbed. And all those weekends of painting, repairing, and renovating paid off. After closing costs, I walked away with nearly $38,000 in profit. Enough to purchase a better home in a better neighborhood. Meanwhile, Gordon's life continued unraveling. His wages were still being garnished. The IRS assessed thousands of dollars in taxes and penalties. He lost the BMW he once loved showing off. It was eventually repossessed and sold at auction far below its value. He was 58 years old. Living with his mother? Working part-time for another real estate company, under supervision instead of leading his own business. Diane received the house in the divorce but eventually had to sell it to pay off debts she never knew existed. She rented a small apartment and started over with a receptionist job. Caleb stayed at Barnes & Noble, rebuilding his own life, one quiet day at a time. I genuinely hoped he learned something. Weeks later, my cousin, who had almost photographed my wedding, called me. After shooting another engagement, the groom mentioned your story. She said, he and his fiancé scheduled an appointment with a financial counselor before getting married. I smiled. Smart decision. He said your experience convinced them that love without transparency isn't love at all. Maybe that was the only good thing to come from everything. A few days later, LinkedIn notified me that Gordon had viewed my profile. Just viewed it. Nothing else. The next morning, I updated my page with my promotion to Senior Project Manager. Petty. Maybe. Satisfying. A little. I also finally sold the engagement ring. The jeweler examined it before smiling. There's a story behind this ring. Isn't there? I laughed softly. Yes. What kind? The kind where walking away saved me far more money than getting married ever would have. He chuckled. You should buy a lottery ticket. I shook my head. It wasn't luck. It never was. Luck didn't stop me from signing those papers. Luck didn't uncover hidden debt. Luck didn't buy my first home. Choices did. Sometimes the greatest investment you'll ever make isn't a house, a promotion, or even a savings account. Sometimes it's having the courage to say one simple word. No. Because your future is never a dowry. Your love is never collateral. And anyone who tries to make you believe otherwise isn't asking for partnership. They're asking for permission to spend your life paying the price of their own decisions